Always been talk around staff levels around $100,000 in wages, and let's get rid of those ones that have the $100,000. Well, if that's the case, we then also might as well say goodbye to the knowledge and then wait for other people to end up coming through Auckland Council. So no way am I going to support this, knowing the impact on service levels that I believe will eventually happen, and also on CapEx projects in at least my local board. Yes, I've got the regional hat on, so that applies right across the board. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Next call to Councillor Fletcher.
Well, thank you. In seconding this motion, Mr. Mayor, I think I'm acknowledging that I would really like to support your proposal. You've put a proposal forward, but what I'm asking is that you actually extend it to further consultation from 2%. And why I want to support your proposal is I think you've genuinely attempted to deal in a compassionate way with those on lower incomes. And I acknowledge those from the Living Wage campaign here today. You have shown compassion for those who are really struggling in our community. But I'm asking you to show the same compassion for those who are caught in these growth pains that Auckland is experiencing. We have heard report after report after report, and we've had submissions after submissions from ratepayers who bought their properties 30, 40 years ago, never with the intention of living in some gentrified suburb, but simply that they worked hard, played fair, bought their property, and now they're being forced with the possibility of having to move out because they simply can't meet their rates bills. So I'm asking you to allow us to show that opportunity for those people in the consultation that we have, which will be informative for when we go into the LTP, is where do people want to see these priorities? Now, we haven't been as imaginative as we could be. We know that there are other avenues that we can pursue. We know that we've got the Cameron report. We also know that a targeted rate on the airport, who are the main beneficiaries, could well help us with the transport gap that we've got. This has been pushed very much by transport needs. We know that that is the big driver. And the Deputy Mayor is quite right, given his constituency in the south, and I'm very familiar with that constituency, to say we've got to keep these projects going. But I'm saying let's put some stretch into our officers. Let's show that we have faith in our community. If we give them good quality information, they can give us good quality responses. But at the same time, let's have compassion. I heard many speeches during the election campaign from yourself and others about reining in rates. Well, why not give the public the opportunity on the consultation on this? I think it's hypocritical not to give them that. I'm keen to see the 2% because I think that is the opportunity for the public to come forward and really state what their priorities are. So I congratulate Mr. Councillor Sayers for putting this forward. He has heard, as you have heard recently, the pressure on ratepayers. We know that this is an interim measure until we get into the LTP. I don't see any harm in going to consult, and there has been a fair bit of fear-mongering put out there, which I think has been unacceptable. And I'm expecting our officers to act in a completely neutral way in terms of the information, but I would like to be able to support your proposal, and with the adoption of this amendment, it will enable me to do so. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Penny-Hulse.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I won't be supporting the amendment, and I just want to make a couple of quick points. Should this amendment go through, I think we just need to be really honest and look at the accompanying material should we decide to talk to our community about what a 2% rates increase will be. The critical issue, as our Chair of Finance has said, our starting point was actually 3.5. We've now got it down to 2.5, and I think we need to explain to people what those cuts have meant. A further reduction down to 2%, Councillor Sayers, I think the accompanying material needs to again explain exactly the quantum of those savings and what they could and how they could result. I don't agree that it isn't a governance issue. It's absolutely a governance issue. If we're to get down to a 2% rates increase, we need to explain to our community what we will stop doing and We need to make that governance decision, and we need to tell our community what we are stopping doing. There's a lot of lip service given to doing more with less. We've increasingly done more with less, and we're doing a hell of a lot more with a hell of a lot less than the previous councils were spending. And it's actually our most vulnerable communities that are impacted. It's down to 2%, would reduce the number of free events. It would reduce the number of people who staff our community centres. That would reduce our library hours. OPEX reduces people. And that's the thing I think we can't lose sight of. So if we are going to go out with this material, let's go out with some honest and robust material that actually explains to our community what taking $20 a year out of their rates might result in. So let's be blunt about this. And I agree with Councillor Fletcher. We have our vulnerable communities on the other side of the scale who are now paying large amounts of rates. We need to be much more clear, and again, in our consultation material, it's a good chance to remind people of exactly what's available to you to support you if you are struggling to pay your rates. Just finally, Mr Mayor, I think you've made a good fist of getting to 2.5%. Some of us may have been more comfortable with a little bit more, but I think we're getting there. I think it's time for a little bit of political honesty about what a 2% increase would mean, what it removes, the people that it removes, the services that it removes, and the fact that we have already removed hundreds of millions of dollars in this budget. I will not be supporting the recommendation or the amendment or the addition, whatever it is, for that reason. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hills.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yeah, I will not be supporting the amendment either. I already have some concerns as a previous local board member on what a 1% reduction already means to frontline services. A 0.5% reduction on the average rates is about $12 a year in savings, which, you know, we're talking $1 a month for the average ratepayer. But what it could mean is, you know, 30 million or more of cuts to our frontline services or services across council. I think B is a little confusing because it says it should not detrimentally affect frontline services, but we're being told that that's what will happen. Out on the campaign, the majority of people on the North Shore told me what their expectations were, that we'd fix transport, that we'd keep good services, we'd keep the free events up, we'd keep the parks looking good, we'd keep the sports fields open, we'd keep all the great things that are happening in Auckland happening. And I think if we keep reducing the bottom line, we're going to get ourselves into trouble, and that's when people really notice, when their backyards and their parks and everything start looking worried. The other comments I'm concerned about is when we just throw out there around freezing wages for a year. I mean, what do we do next annual plan? Do we say we freeze them again? Then we start losing staff, and then the cost of recruiting and the cost of actually loss of time, you know, that blows out. And then we also have to think that staff are not just this magical thing. It's actually people's lives. Their bills are going up, their power bills are going up, their water bills are going up, their kids' school fees are going up. So, you know, we have to look at those staff members as ratepayers as well. So if we start cutting their pay, you know, just to save them $12 a year on the rates, what does that actually mean? So, you know, and I think we need to keep acknowledging that we're already saving $270 million a year based on 2010, which is, it's massive. It's not like the staff have been doing nothing. It's not like all our departments haven't been trying their best. Last time we had, you know, a year ago on the local board, we put our own money into some of the cuts that, or the efficiencies that were made. We put $12,000 back into the libraries because we didn't want the hours cut. We put $54,000 into things like mechanical edging because that was cut. So, you know, the local boards are going to be coming back to us and saying, well, what else do we need to fund? And then that means all the good things that their communities enjoy are affected as well. So, you know, a 0.5% to save ratepayers $12 when you know, I think we're doing a really good job getting down to 2.5. But I think it is about being honest about what effects even the 2.5 makes. So 2% for me is a stretch too far. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I have a little bit of sympathy for the sentiment behind Councillor Sayer's amendment here, coming as it does in the context of a period of historically low inflation rates, and a recent council passed in which numbers of ratepayers, big numbers of ratepayers, have been hit with significant rate bills. Admittedly, part of that being attributable to the balancing out of rates across Auckland, but also others to do with ad hoc additions, such as the transport levy that were imposed without any consultation whatsoever. So I think out in the community, there is a sense that a correction is well overdue, and I respect the fact that the Mayor went out with a 2.5%, which I personally welcome. There were other councillors, a number of which are around the table here today, who went out with 2%. So as much as people respect the Mayor's leadership, there is leadership from councillors too, and we're quite entitled to do that and to ask questions as a consequence. I think that a number of Councillor Sayer's frustrations, if I could put it that way, that arise from this amendment go to the ability to direct, to have councillors to have a more directive role and a greater oversight of operational spend. And he made that clear very on a number of occasions through our discussions. And I certainly don't feel that we have personally that oversight of operational spend. We get herded into the annual plan and the long-term plan round, and people, as Councillor Fletcher quite rightly said, feel as if they have no right to question the dictates that are being put out there. I believe there is room for significant cuts to spending, and I think we've had some dramatic examples of that, very recently with the likes of the Western Springs instance, for instance, where huge escalation in cost for a project that was previously significantly lower. So I understand the need for political honesty too, and I don't want to mislead people, and I think, as I understand it, there's an opportunity here to do both, to both explore the possibility of a 2% rates increase and also have the honesty to spell out what that would mean. I think that would be in everyone's interest to do that. So if things indeed are as dire as the 0.5% reduction we're hearing, then let's spell it out to the community. Let's spell it out. Let's put it on the table, because that certainly hasn't been a feature of previous consultation rounds where stuff has been put out, or in the case of the transport levy not put out, and then decisions made that sort of lower our credibility. So I'm all for political honesty. If there are to be significant service cuts put out as a consequence of a 0.5% readjustment, well, spell out what they are so people can make their choices in the full knowledge. So I don't think this amendment is necessarily contradictory to the Mayor's lead out of 2.5%. I think a 2% increase with an explanation as to what that would mean would be entirely compatible and indeed desirable if we're looking to carry the Auckland public along with us.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Clow.
Thank you. I would just start by complimenting Councillor Hills for his very fine words, and long may you be a councillor representing the North Shore.
You agree with me?
We need to be aware that in the existing budget, we're actually trying to find savings of 42 million already to meet the 3.5. By dropping to 2.5, we have to find another $70 million in savings. Dropping to 2% means we have to find another $105 million in total on top of the 42. So these are significant amounts. So the proposal of dropping to 2% is equivalent to $7 million in total. I would like Councillor Sayers to confirm whether he asked the Mayor over the last week to add into his mayoral proposal another $6.1 million for road sealing in the Rodney area. That's my question of Councillor Sayers.
Okay, you can ask questions, but there's no requirement on members to answer them.
Well, I think it's
He's probably
relevant.
got a different
He wants to
methodology
save
for
$7 million, but wants
prioritisation.
another
Yeah, yeah.
6.1
Sorry,
for road sealing and Rodney.
Sorry, the member is entitled to ask questions, but there's no compunction on a councillor to answer them, and we're not having across the floor debate at this stage. We're taking it orderly with people speaking one step at a time. Councillor, have you concluded? Councillor Clow, you finished? Yep.
Oh, yeah, I haven't got the answer, but...
Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I find myself agreeing with a lot of people around the table, whether they support or they don't. Because in actual fact, I don't see this as replacing what we're putting out there as an additional, just as we consulted on a range of UAGC in the LTP and last year, let's consult on a range of options and let people make their own decisions.